All right, here's the top 5 edge rushers, courtesy of our draft analyst, Leger Douzable. Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. Number 2 pick in Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft. Top of Douzable's list here. Now, the Michigan man staying in the state, potentially. A lot of mock drafts having him go to the Detroit Lions. And let's talk about the author of said list, Leger Douzable, joining us, the former defensive end and one of our CBS Sports draft analysts. We're talking strengths and weaknesses, Leger, of these top prospects. Oh, yeah. So let's start with the man at the top of the list, the consensus top player in the class in terms of edge rushers. What do you see as the strengths and the weaknesses of the Michigan man, Aiden Hutchinson?
Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson is a technician with his hands. In the run game, he does a really good job of making sure his hands are inside the chest plate of offensive linemen, and he knocks them back. And then in the pass rush game, his hands are very active. He has a bevy of pass rush moves. He wins with the outside swipe on the outside. Then he goes speed to power, and then he fights off inside to get to the quarterback and hit him and get sacks. And then off the counter off of that, he uses the long arm to the club outside to bend that edge to get to quarterbacks. This guy is an ultimate competitor, too. He is going to elevate your defense's gameplay from every position. And he's also a great leader. I mean, a 2-time captain at Michigan. So you're getting a great leader when you get a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. Some things that he can work out on, though, when it comes to pass rush, this guy jumps a lot of the cannons. He jumps the snap count. If you look at the Iowa game this past year, there was a couple times where the refs could have blew the whistle and called him offside. So he has to be cognizant of that at the next level. And then also sometimes coaches will ask him to drop in coverage to cover a running back, and he struggled in that aspect sometimes. If you look at the 2 top teams in the NFL draft, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars and you have the Detroit Lions. Well, both of these defenses display a 4-3 and a 3-4 hybrid. And when I mean 4-3, it's 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers. And then a 3-4 front is 3 heavy defensive linemen and 2 outside edge rushers with 2 middle linebackers. So defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn from the Detroit Lions and defensive coordinator Mike Caldwell will every so often make sure that their edge rush guys drop in coverage. That's something that Aiden Hutchinson has to work on. But ultimately, I believe he's the best pro-ready edge rush guy in this class, and he's going to elevate your defense from day one.
Yeah, and a guy who a lot of people truly believe is one of those guys who will elevate no matter where he lands. All right, Jermaine Johnson, speaking of domination, dominated the Senior Bowl. Tremendous flexibility for a man his size, but he's not the fastest guy. What are your strengths and weaknesses for Johnson?
Well, I just talked about Aiden Hutchinson being the most pro-ready prospect on the edge, but Jermaine Johnson is right there behind him. To me, he's the best edge defender against the run. This guy just plays with heavy hands. And when he puts hands on you, you get knocked backwards. And then the thing is, he doesn't just stay on blocks, right? He's a violent, disengaged guy. So he gets off of the blockers and makes plays in the backfield. Effort. This guy is a high effort guy. You're not going to have to coach up effort with this guy. When you turn on the film, he's always in pursuit of ball carriers and quarterbacks. Some things that he really needs to work on, though, is that he needs to have a variety of pass rush moves. If you look at when Jermaine Johnson transferred from Georgia to Florida State, he really only won with the swipe and then the speed to power long arm. But as the season wore on, he got a lot better with that, right? You saw him winning with some inside swipe moves. You saw him winning with some outside spin moves, inside spin moves. And when he went to the Senior Bowl, he put on a pass rush display. So much so that he only stayed for 2 days because all he could have did was potentially hurt himself and hurt his draft stock. And then sometimes I talked about him playing with heavy hands and violent hands with disengaging, but sometimes in the run game, he plays a little bit too high. He needs to get that pad level down, work on having good leverage. That way he doesn't always get knocked off the ball. But a lot of times because he plays with so much heavy hands and also plays so violent with his hands that he can get away with it. But if he plays with better leverage, he can really dominate in the run game. I always like to look at top prospects when they go against each other. So if you turn on the film in the NC State game versus Florida State game, Ike Ekwonu, who a lot of talented evaluators have as the #1 offensive line prospect, so do I. He had a really good battle with Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson got him sometimes. Ike Ekwonu got him sometimes. So I believe Jermaine Johnson, right behind Aiden Hutchinson, will come in from day one and be a starter and really uplift your defensive line.
And Johnson, one of those guys who wanted to show that he could do it in 2 different conferences, and certainly did that, going from Georgia to Florida State. All right, Kayvon Thibodeaux gets to the quarterback. 19 pressures in a 2-week stretch versus Cal and UCLA last season that really caught a lot of attention. Not a lot of holes in his game, but you found a few, Leger. Take us through them.
Yeah, this guy probably has the best first step quickness off the ball in this draft class. Very explosive off the ball, so much so that he puts offensive linemen in binds, right? They're always retreating because they're worried about his speed. And that's what he brings off the edge. Also, he does a really good job of setting the edge versus tight ends, knocking them back, making sure the running back does not get to the edge of the defense, always funneling him back to the help on defense. But some things that he needs to work on, I believe his slight frame, right? He's about 6'4", 250 pounds. The way that he plays with speed, the power, and the violence that he plays in the run game, I think he needs to put on a few more pounds. That way he's able to really knock back offensive tackles in the league. And I just talked about it, right? He usually only wins with speed and speed to power. He struggles sometimes at the top of the rush as far as flipping your hips, taking away that punching surface from offensive tackles and closing on quarterbacks. And then when he's engaged with offensive linemen, he really struggles getting to his second move. So he really needs to work on some of those things as far as working on his second move when he does get engaged with offensive tackles, and then flipping his hips at the top of the rush to close in on quarterbacks.
But still looking at a guy that could be a third edge rush pick taken in the top 5 in the coming NFL draft. Travon Walker out of Georgia, 7 pressures in the national championship game. Shades of Rashawn Gary for many. If you're looking at a comp here, what do you have for Walker?
I mean, he's an athletic freak of nature. I mean, this guy is 270 pounds, and we saw him put on a show at the Combine. I mean, he ran the 40 in 4.51 for somebody that's 270 pounds. That is absurd. And his 10-yard split, I believe, was a 1.54, which is crazy. So again, he's a very athletic freak of nature. And you see that closing speed on film when he's, in pursuit of running backs. And even sometimes when they drop him in coverage and he has to close in on a guy that just caught a pass. The thing with Travon Walker is he's also very versatile. They moved him up and down the defensive line at Georgia. He played on the edge at the 5 technique. He played at the 4-eye inside of the 4 technique. He played on the edge of the guard at the 3 technique. And I even saw him line up on the edge of the center at 1 technique in pass rush situations. They dropped him in coverage. So a defensive coordinator can really use him as a chess piece and move him all over the place. The thing about him is he's just so raw. He's raw as a pass rusher. On tape, he usually only wins with the bull rush, which is power. It seems like he doesn't really have a set pass rush plan when he's getting ready to rush the passer. So a coach is really going to have to hone in on that and really get those athletic skills to meet the fundamentals. And the thing is, I talked about him being versatile. The thing is, where do you put him at? He's lined up all over the place at Georgia. You don't know where you can really line him up at. I think he'll be best suited to be a base left end, left end and really set the edge for the defense and then move him inside, use some of that athletic ability at the 3 technique on passing downs. But we on tape haven't seen him really dominate at a specific position. So the thing about, Travon Walker is he is so athletic. And if you can able to hone in that athletic ability with some fundamentals, the sky is the limit for him. But he's probably the biggest boom or bust prospect in this draft.
Well, and when you look at him too, I mean, he's a tweener, right? At 6'6", 275, playing 3, 4, and 5 technique. I mean, jack of all trades, master of none, as the saying goes, in terms of where he is. But as you mentioned, if you can settle him into one, certainly a player who's got the talent to dominate. All right, you talked about sort of having a plan in terms of when you attack that pass rush. Arnold Ebiketie, known for his hands and being able to stop guys from locking him up. He always has a plan in terms of when he's rushing. What do you have for Ebiketie?
To me, Arnold Ebiketie is the best pure pass rusher in this draft class. Has a really good first step explosion off the ball, and he's just slippery and bendy. Uses his length really well when it comes to pass rushing, has active hands. And the thing is, he never gets glued on blockers. So even when his first move doesn't work, he does a good job of countering with swipes, does a good job of countering with speed to power with the long arm, and then off of that, speed to power and swiping to get to the edge of the offensive tackle and bend the corner to get to the quarterback. So he's just really proficient with his hands. The thing about him, he's a slender build guy as well too. 6'2", 250 pounds. And some scouts wonder, can he really hold up against the run in the NFL game? There's times on tape where you see him lock guys off, lock guys out, but then he gets walked off the ball. And that's because he plays too high, doesn't play with good leverage sometimes in the run game, but also because he's slender built. So this is a guy, I believe, from day one is going to help you on third down and passing situation. And he's the most purest pass rusher in this draft class, and you can maybe help him in his run game as far as him playing in the run, as far as locking guys out, playing with lower pad level, and he can maybe work his way into being a starter. But I believe he'll have his impact right away putting his hand in the dirt and getting after the quarterback on third down.
Ebikidi, one of those guys, our Ryan Wilson, has him going near the top of the second round to the Seattle Seahawks. All right, lastly, under the radar pass rushers in the draft. We love this. Give us your under the radar pick.
Yeah, my under the radar pick is the defensive end Sam Williams from Ole Miss. This guy's tape is as good as any top prospect in this draft class. I mean, he had 12.5 sacks last year in the SEC, second only behind Will Anderson, who most likely will be the #1 pick next year from Alabama coming out in the draft class. This guy can do it all. He's springy and explosive off the ball, plays with it extremely hard. The thing is, sometimes he doesn't play with good leverage and can get cut off on the backside, and there has been issues with him jumping off sides and hitting the quarterback late. But he has all the tools to be a really good defensive end in this draft class. And there's also some teams will have to do due diligence on him, right? Because he's had some off the field issues. So you have to do your due diligence to see if you're comfortable taking a guy like Sam Williams. But the thing is, if you get him late in the second or early third round, you're getting a potential starter with great value in the third round. So not many teams can say that getting a third round pick and turning him into a starter maybe from day one would be great value in the draft. And I believe he's an under the radar guy that will get after quarterbacks in the NFL. So he's a guy that you got to keep your eye on.
And as you know, here on CBS Sports HQ, we love talking about guys that are going to give us good value. He is CBS Sports NFL draft analyst Leger Douzable discussing strengths and weaknesses of his top 5 edge rushers ahead of the NFL draft in 2 weeks' time. Thanks, Leger. In terms of Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft, we mentioned that we could see 3 edge rushers taken in the top 5 picks of the NFL draft, if it all goes the way that Ryan Wilson thinks it might. Michigan's Aiden Hutchinson considered the top of the heap in terms of that. We could have 7 edge rushers drafted in the first 40 overall picks.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.